I paid for my son's future before he ever earned $1. And last Tuesday, he tried to take control of my past. The lawyer didn't offer me coffee. Didn't smile. He just slid the folder across the polished oak table. Mrs. Bennet, we just need your signature. My son Mark stood behind him, arms crossed, jaw tight. His wife, Lauren, sat beside me, close enough to touch my elbow. It's just to simplify things, she said softly. At your age, paperwork gets overwhelming. I'm 68. I drove myself there. I still balance my own accounts. I adjusted my glasses and read the title. Immediate estate authority transfer. Immediate, not after I die. Now. Primary financial control. Mark Bennet. My stomach turned cold. I didn't request this, I said. The lawyer avoided my eyes. Mark finally spoke. Mom, it's just easier if I handle things. Easier for who? That was the moment something shifted inside me. They weren't helping. They were positioning. And judging by how prepared those papers were, I was the only one who didn't know the decision had already been made.
Welcome to Life Voices, where family drama turns into late-life justice. Subscribe for more emotional family stories. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from.
For 43 years, I never missed a mortgage payment. Not when my husband got sick. Not when interest rates climbed. Not when Mark was in college and tuition felt like a second mortgage. I built everything brick by brick. And apparently, they decided I was ready to hand over the keys. That meeting kept replaying in my head all night. Lauren's perfume, Mark's silence, the lawyer's pen already uncapped. Too prepared. People only prepare like that when the outcome is supposed to be automatic. The next morning, I pulled every financial file from my cabinet. Bank statements, property deeds, investment summaries, 3 rental properties in Arlington, 2 brokerage accounts, 1 paid-off house worth just under $1.2 million. No debt, no cognitive decline, no confusion, just assets. And suddenly, I understood something I hadn't allowed myself to see before. For the past 7 years, temporary help had become permanent. It started small. Mom, we're between bonuses. Mom, the daycare costs are insane. Mom, it's just a short-term bridge. I never said no. I covered $2,300 a month rent for 18 months. $42,000 for Mark's failed startup. $19,000 in credit card consolidation. 2 family vacations I didn't attend. Private school deposits. When I added everything up that morning, the number stared back at me. $187,640. That wasn't support. That was a lifestyle subsidy. And now they wanted authority. Not inheritance. Authority. Control before I was even gone. Around noon, my phone buzzed. Mark. I let it ring twice before answering. Hey, Mom, he said casually. Too casually. Did you think about the paperwork? I read it, I replied. Silence. It's just precautionary, he added. In case something happens. Something already happened, I said quietly. What does that mean? It means you prepared legal documents without asking me. Another pause. Lauren's voice faint in the background. He lowered his tone. We're just trying to protect the estate. There it was. Not protect me. Protect the estate. My estate doesn't need protection, I said. It needs respect. His sigh was heavy, irritated. Mom, don't make this difficult. That sentence again. I looked at the framed photo on my wall. Mark at 12 years old, missing his front tooth, holding a science fair ribbon. I raised that boy alone after his father died. Worked double listings in real estate. Skipped vacations. Sold my jewelry once to cover hospital bills. And now I was difficult. Here's what's going to happen, I said evenly. Nothing gets signed. His tone sharpened. You're being emotional. No, I answered. I'm being alert. He hung up first. That told me everything. People who believe they're entitled don't argue long. They escalate. And escalation came faster than I expected. 2 days later, I stopped by my bank to review account access. The manager, Susan, looked uncomfortable. Mrs. Bennet, your son called earlier this week. My pulse stayed steady. About what? He inquired about account monitoring procedures. Monitoring. I smiled politely. Please remove any secondary inquiries. No third-party access. She nodded. Of course. I left with certified copies of every account authorization. Then I drove straight to a different attorney. Not the family one. A litigator. His name was Charles Hendricks. Gray hair, sharp eyes, no unnecessary warmth. He read the document Mark had presented. Then he leaned back. This, he said calmly, is a preemptive financial control maneuver. I didn't blink. Meaning? Meaning someone is positioning to manage assets while you're still legally competent. My chest felt tight, but not from fear. From clarity. So what do? I asked. He folded his hands. First, we secure everything. That was the first time since the lawyer's office that I felt steady. Because I realized something important. They thought I was aging out of control. They forgot who built it. And I wasn't finished managing my own life. He didn't try to comfort me. He didn't say, maybe it's a misunderstanding. He said, we lock it down now, or we fight it later. There's something cold about legal language. It removes emotion from betrayal. Charles explained it step by step. We would revoke any informal access, draft a new will with clear clauses, add a no contest provision, document every financial transfer I'd made to Mark over the last 7 years. Paper trails win wars, he said. War. I never thought I'd hear that word connected to my own child. But the truth settled in quietly. This wasn't about love. It wasn't about concern. It was about leverage. And leverage only works when the other person feels weak. I wasn't weak. I was just late to recognizing the pattern. That evening, alone in my kitchen, I poured myself a glass of wine and looked around the house I paid off 21 years ago. Every wall, every floorboard, every framed memory, built by me. No one simplified my life. I earned it, and for the first time, I stopped thinking like a mother. I started thinking like the owner. The shift didn't happen in one dramatic moment. It happened quietly, in small, deliberate steps. The next morning, I changed the locks. Not because Mark had a key, but because I needed to feel the click of control again. The locksmith didn't ask questions. He just worked. Metal turning, steel replacing steel. Final. Security isn't always about danger. Sometimes it's about dignity. After that, I installed cameras. Front door, driveway, backyard gate. If someone planned to question my competence, I wanted documentation of my clarity. Then I met Charles again. He had already drafted amendments. A new will, revised trust language, and one clause that made me pause. If any beneficiary attempts to challenge capacity or seek involuntary control of assets, their share is automatically reduced to $1. $1. Symbolic. Final. Do you want to include it? He asked. I didn't answer immediately, because adding that clause meant admitting something I had resisted, that my son might actually try. I signed it. Clean signature. Steady hand. No tremor. That afternoon, I received the first real pushback. Mark showed up unannounced. Lauren stayed in the car. He didn't hug me when I opened the door. Why are you being extreme? He asked before stepping inside. Extreme. Interesting word. I'm securing my finances, I said. You hired a lawyer without telling us. Yes. That feels hostile. I looked at him carefully. You tried to transfer authority without telling me. He exhaled sharply. You're making this adversarial. No, I said evenly. You did. He paced my living room like he used to when he was 16 and grounded. We're just trying to plan ahead. For what? I asked. In case you decline. There it was again. Decline. Have I missed bills? I asked. No. Have I forgotten appointments? No. Have I asked you to manage anything? Silence. He ran a hand through his hair. You're getting older, Mom. Yes, I said calmly. That happens to everyone. Lauren finally came inside. She carried a folder. Different one. Thicker. We don't want this to go to court, she said softly. Court. My chest tightened. So that's where we are? I asked. Mark avoided my eyes. We consulted someone too. Of course they did. Lauren slid papers across my coffee table. Petition draft. Guardianship evaluation. Preliminary medical assessment request. They hadn't filed yet, but they had prepared it. My stomach dropped, but not from fear. From confirmation. You're questioning my capacity? I asked quietly. Lauren tried to sound gentle. We're just concerned. Concern doesn't start with paperwork. Concern starts with conversation. You're not concerned, I said. You're strategic. Mark's jaw hardened. Mom, if you don't cooperate, this will get ugly. Ugly. He was threatening litigation. In my house. On my furniture. After I financed half his life. I stood up. You need to leave. Lauren's tone shifted, less soft. If this goes to a hearing, the court will evaluate everything. Spending patterns, isolation, decision-making, isolation. They were building a narrative. You've been making unusual decisions lately, Mark added. Like what? Selling one of the rental properties. I stared at him. I sold it because the market was favorable. You didn't consult us. I almost laughed. Consult you? About my property? You are not my board of directors, I said coldly. Lauren crossed her arms. If the court sees erratic liquidation. It was one property, I cut in. And the proceeds? She pressed. Moved to diversified accounts. Mark shook his head. This is exactly what we mean. No, what they meant was loss of access. Loss of visibility, loss of quiet control. They had gotten used to influence. And I had allowed it. Until now. You're preparing to legally remove my autonomy, I said. Mark didn't deny it. He just said, we're trying to prevent mistakes. That sentence settled heavy in the room. Prevent mistakes. As if I were a liability. As if I were already incompetent. I walked to the front door and opened it. Leave. Neither of them moved at first. Then Mark stepped forward. This doesn't have to be adversarial. It already is. Lauren gathered the papers slowly. At the threshold, Mark paused. You're forcing our hand. No, I was forcing their intentions into daylight. When the door closed, the house felt different. Not broken. Clear. I called Charles immediately. They're drafting guardianship paperwork, I said. He was quiet for half a second. Then we escalate first. That word again. Escalate. He explained the strategy calmly. Independent medical evaluation, scheduled by us. Capacity certification. Formal letter documenting harassment. Preemptive filing declaring full competency. If they attempt emergency guardianship, he said, we'll have counter evidence ready. Paper trails win wars. That night, I didn't cry. I organized. Bank binders, investment summaries, property sale records, 7 years of transfers to Mark. Every dollar documented. If they wanted a courtroom, I would bring receipts. And something inside me shifted again. I stopped hoping this was a misunderstanding. I started preparing for a fight. Because sometimes the hardest truth isn't that your child changed. It's that you finally saw them clearly. And clarity doesn't break you. It strengthens your spine. The letter arrived on a Thursday. Certified mail, thick envelope, law firm header I didn't recognize. I signed for it without shaking. Inside was exactly what Charles predicted. Notice of intent to file petition for guardianship. Temporary emergency review requested. Grounds cited. Age-related financial risk. Recent asset liquidation. Isolation from primary family support. Uncharacteristic legal restructuring. They built a narrative. Clean, clinical, strategic. It painted me as vulnerable. Manipulated by outside counsel. Emotionally reactive. The part that almost made me laugh? Subject displays increased paranoia regarding routine estate planning. Paranoia. Because I refused to surrender control. I placed the document flat on my kitchen table and stared at it. Not with panic, with analysis. This wasn't emotional. This was tactical positioning. Mark didn't storm in. He escalated through paperwork, which meant he believed the system would side with him. Charles called within 20 minutes of receiving his copy. They're moving fast, he said. So are we, I replied. He had already scheduled my independent evaluation with a court-certified geriatric specialist. Full cognitive battery, financial literacy assessment, executive function testing. If we control the medical narrative, he said, their petition weakens immediately. The appointment was Monday morning. I arrived 15 minutes early. No confusion, no missed forms, no hesitation. Dr. Patel was calm, direct. She didn't treat me like glass. She asked real questions, complex ones, investment strategy, risk diversification, liquidity planning, tax timing on property sale. I answered everyone without notes. Then memory recall tests, pattern recognition, verbal reasoning. At the end, she closed her folder and looked at me. Mrs. Bennett, why do you think your son is pursuing this? I didn't dramatize it. He's accustomed to access, I said. And I revoked it. She held my gaze for a long moment. I see no cognitive impairment. Clear, measured, clinical. She prepared a formal report within 48 hours. fully competent, high executive functioning, financially literate. Charles filed it immediately. Preemptive strike. 2 days later, Mark called. Not to apologize, to negotiate. Maybe we can handle this privately, he said. Ah, there it was. They didn't expect resistance backed by documentation. You initiated legal action, I replied. Now we finish it properly. His voice tightened. You're embarrassing us. Embarrassing. Because I defended myself. You filed paperwork to remove my autonomy, I said calmly. What did you expect? Lauren got on the line. We can withdraw the petition if you agree to structured oversight. Oversight, supervised spending thresholds, quarterly reporting, joint signature requirements over $50,000. They weren't retreating. They were reframing control. No, I said. Silence. Then Mark. If this goes before a judge, everything becomes public record. Good. Then let it, I answered. He hung up again. That pattern never changed. When control slipped, conversation ended. The hearing was scheduled 3 weeks later. Emergency guardianship denied pending review, which meant they had to prove incapacity, not suspicion. In the days leading up, something surprising happened. Friends started calling. Apparently, word travels fast when lawyers get involved. But the calls weren't accusatory. They were concerned. Linda, is everything okay? I heard something about court? I didn't hide. My son is challenging my competency, I said plainly. The pause on the other end of each call was the same. Shock. Because the woman they knew traveled twice a year, managed rental renovations herself, negotiated contracts, handled complex escrow closings. The narrative didn't match reality. And narratives collapse when facts stand steady. The morning of the hearing, I wore navy. Structured blazer, low heels, minimal jewelry. I wasn't dressing for sympathy. I was dressing for credibility. Mark avoided eye contact in the courthouse hallway. Lauren looked composed, too composed. Their attorney reviewed files one last time. Charles stood beside me. You don't speak unless asked, he said quietly. I won't. Inside the courtroom, it was smaller than I expected. Less dramatic, more procedural. The judge read the petition silently, then looked at Mark. On what basis are you asserting incapacity? His attorney cited age, recent property sale, withdrawal from family consultation. Then Charles stood, submitted Dr. Patel's report, highlighted full cognitive assessment, entered 7 years of documented financial transfers, and one final exhibit, text messages from Mark, requests for money, statements about estate planning urgency. One message read, if you don't restructure soon, things could get complicated. The judge read it twice, then looked directly at my son. Are you seeking guardianship due to genuine concern, he asked evenly, or financial positioning? The room went still. Mark's face flushed. Lauren stared straight ahead. Their attorney requested brief recess. Denied. The judge reviewed everything again, then spoke clearly. Petition dismissed. Not delayed, not reconsidered, dismissed. And then one final sentence. The court notes potential financial motivation behind this filing. Potential. Polite language, but sharp. Mark didn't look at me when we walked out. He walked ahead, fast. Lauren followed. Charles leaned toward me. This isn't over emotionally, he said. But legally? You just set the boundary. Outside the courthouse, the air felt different. Cooler, sharper. For the first time in weeks, my breathing felt steady. Not because I won, because I refused to be erased. And something deeper settled in me. Not anger, not revenge, clarity. The woman who built her life alone once already wasn't afraid of rebuilding again. The only difference now? I wasn't rebuilding, I was protecting. And protection doesn't require permission. The silence after the hearing lasted 9 days. No calls, no texts, no apologies, just absence. It's strange how quiet feels different once you stop chasing it. Before, silence meant tension. Now, it meant distance. And distance, I was beginning to understand, can be healthy. On the 10th day, Mark showed up again. Alone. No Lauren, no lawyer, just him. He stood on my porch like a teenager who'd been caught sneaking in past curfew. I didn't think it would go that far, he said before I even invited him inside. I didn't step aside. How far did you think filing for guardianship would go? He rubbed the back of his neck. We were advised it was a protective move. I repeated. He didn't correct it. You embarrassed us in court, he said. There it was again. Embarrassment, not regret, not remorse. Image. I defended myself, I replied. You made it look like we were after your money. I held his gaze. You were. His jaw tightened. That's not fair. No, I said calmly. What you did wasn't fair. He exhaled hard. You've changed. That almost made me smile. No, I said quietly. I stopped pretending. He looked past me into the house. The house he grew up in. The hallway where I marked his height in pencil every birthday. The kitchen where I packed his lunches for 12 straight years. You're cutting us off, he said. I'm protecting myself. He stepped closer. So that's it? You just freeze us out? I crossed my arms. You filed to legally remove my autonomy. He ran out of arguments. When logic collapses, people pivot to guilt. The kids miss you, he said. Ah, leverage. I miss them too, I answered. But I won't buy access. His eyes flickered. You think this is about money? It is about money, I said. Because you made it about money. He didn't deny it this time. He just said something softer. We're struggling. There it was. The truth, finally peeking through strategy. With what? I asked. The mortgage, the school tuition, credit lines. How much? I asked calmly. He hesitated. 280,000. The number hung in the air. Not survival debt, lifestyle debt. And you thought controlling my estate would fix that, I said. It would stabilize things. Stabilize. Such a clean word for dependency. I am not your stabilization plan, I replied. He looked tired, older. For a moment, I saw the boy who once asked me to check under his bed for monsters. But this wasn't a monster. This was entitlement shaped over years of unchecked access. You never said no, he whispered. And there it was, the most honest sentence he'd spoken. You're right, I said. Silence stretched between us. I thought helping you meant loving you, I continued. I didn't realize I was teaching you to expect rescue. He swallowed. So what now? Now, that's always the real question. I restructure my estate, I said evenly. His eyes sharpened. Including what? Everything. I had already done it. 2 properties sold. Proceeds diversified. A charitable foundation drafted. Scholarships for single mothers entering real estate. Funding for elder financial abuse prevention. And 1 irrevocable trust. Not for Mark. For my grandchildren. Locked until age 35. No early access. No parental control. He went pale. You're punishing us. No, I said. I'm correcting a mistake. Lauren called later that evening. Her voice was cool again. So you're rewriting everything. Yes. You're destroying family unity. Family unity built on financial dependence isn't unity. It's leverage. I offered support for years, I said. You offered legal pressure. She was quiet for a long moment. You'll regret isolating yourself. I looked around my quiet living room. My organized files. My signed documents. My steady hands. No, I said softly. I regret waiting this long. When I hung up, I didn't feel victorious. I felt resolved. There's a difference. Victory is loud. Resolution is quiet. The following week, I did something unexpected. I booked a flight. Not to escape. To expand. California coast. 3 weeks. Ocean air. No emergency transfers. No strategic conversations. Just space. Because here's what no one tells you about reclaiming control. It's exhausting. Standing up to your own child isn't empowering in a cinematic way. It's heavy, but heaviness doesn't mean wrong. It means real. On my last night before the trip, I sat at my kitchen table again. Same place I added up 7 years of transfers. Same place I opened that first guardianship notice. And I understood something clearly. Love without boundaries becomes currency. And currency, once expected, stops feeling like love. I wasn't cutting off my son. I was cutting off the version of myself that believed sacrifice guaranteed respect. It doesn't. Respect comes from structure, from clarity, from consequences. Mark texted once more before I left. We didn't think you'd fight. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed back, you forgot who raised you. And for the first time in months, I slept without replaying the meeting in my head. California air feels different when you don't owe anyone anything. The first morning I woke up to the sound of waves instead of notifications. No bank alerts. No missed calls. No urgent texts disguised as concern. Just ocean. I rented a small place overlooking the water. Nothing extravagant. Clean, quiet, mine. For 3 days, I didn't check email. On the 4th day, I did. 32 unread messages, most promotional. 2 from acquaintances asking if everything was settled. And 1 from Mark. Subject line: "We need to talk." I didn't open it immediately. I poured coffee first, sat on the balcony, watched a woman walking her dog along the shoreline. There's something grounding about watching strangers live normal lives while your own feels rearranged. When I finally opened the email, it was shorter than I expected. "We met with a financial advisor. We're restructuring debt. I didn't realize how bad it was. I'm handling it. No apology, but also no demand." That was new. I read it twice, then closed my laptop. Growth doesn't usually arrive with fireworks. It arrives quietly, sometimes forced, sometimes delayed, but I wasn't naive enough to assume one email rewrote the pattern. Patterns change when pressure shifts. And for the first time, I had shifted it. 2 days later, Lauren called. Not defensive, not cold, measured. "We're refinancing the house," she said. "That's wise," I answered. "We didn't expect you to go that far with the trust changes." I didn't soften my tone. "You didn't expect resistance." She exhaled slowly. No, there it was again. Expectation. Expectation that I would fold. That motherhood equals compliance. "We miscalculated," she admitted. That was the closest thing to accountability I had heard from her. Silence lingered between us. "I never wanted court," she added. "But you drafted the paperwork." Another pause. We panicked. I leaned back in the chair. Over what? Losing control. At least she said it plainly. Control. Not safety. Not concern. Control. "I am not an asset class," I said calmly. "I am your husband's mother." Her voice lowered. We felt shut out. "You felt shut out of what?" I asked. "Money?" That stung. I could hear it. But truth rarely lands gently. "You never said we were overextending," she said quietly. "It wasn't my job to manage your lifestyle." That ended the conversation, not explosively, just firmly. After I hung up, I realized something subtle but important. They were recalibrating, not because they suddenly understood morality, but because the leverage was gone. Leverage changes behavior faster than lectures. The second week in California, I met a woman named Patricia. 72, divorced at 68, sold her business, moved to the coast. "No one prepares you for financial independence late in life," she told me over lunch. Especially not as a woman. We talked for hours, about sons who expect, about daughters who distance, about how quickly support turns into entitlement. "You know what changed everything for me?" she said. "What?" I stopped funding comfort. That sentence echoed. Funding comfort. That's exactly what I had been doing. Not rescuing emergencies, not solving crises. Funding comfort. Comfort is addictive, and when you remove it, people call it cruelty. But it isn't cruelty, it's correction. When I flew home 3 weeks later, the house felt different. Not empty, empowered, mail stacked neatly, no legal notices, no emergency filings. Charles had sent one update. "They have withdrawn any further petition discussion." Withdrawn. Quietly, without ceremony. I called him that afternoon. "Do you think it's over?" I asked. "Legally," he said. "Yes." "Emotionally?" He paused. "That depends on whether they learned or adjusted." Important distinction. Learning changes character. Adjustment changes strategy. A month passed. Mark invited me to dinner. Neutral ground. Restaurant. Public. Controlled. I almost declined. But avoidance doesn't build clarity. It postpones it. He looked thinner, less confident, more aware. "We sold the second car," he said after we sat down. "That's practical. We consolidated tuition plans." Good. No defensiveness. No blame. Just information. "I didn't realize how much I relied on you," he admitted. That sentence landed heavier than any courtroom ruling. "I didn't realize how much I allowed it," I replied. We ate in silence for a few minutes. Then he said something that surprised me. "I don't want the kids to see that pattern." That was the first real sign of learning. "Then break it," I said calmly. "How?" "Handle your own instability." He nodded slowly. "I'm trying, not demanding, not strategizing, trying." For the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was negotiating. I felt like I was observing growth. But here's what I understood more clearly than ever. Trust doesn't reset automatically. It rebuilds slowly, deliberately, with boundaries intact. I did not restore allowances. I did not reopen access. I did not adjust the trust. Structure remains, because structure protects both sides. When I got home that night, I walked through my house without tension in my chest. Not because my son changed overnight, but because I did. The woman who once equated sacrifice with love no longer lives here. The woman who understands that love without respect becomes control. She remains, and control ends the moment you stop signing. So tell me honestly, if your child tried to legally take over your life while you were still standing strong, would you fight, or would you fold? And where are you watching from tonight? Time doesn't magically repair damage. It reveals whether change is real. 3 months after the court dismissal, something happened that told me exactly where we stood. Mark didn't call to ask for money. He called to say no. "Mom," he said carefully, "Lauren's parents offered to help us with a short-term loan. I told them we're handling it ourselves." I didn't speak right away. Not because I was emotional. Because I was measuring the shift. "That's responsible," I said finally. "It feels different," he admitted. "Harder, but cleaner." Cleaner. That word mattered. Debt financed by pride feels different than debt financed by expectation. For the first time in years, he sounded like a man carrying his own weight. But clarity has layers. 2 weeks later, I received an unexpected call. Adult Protective Services. Calm voice. Formal tone. "Mrs. Bennett, we received a follow-up inquiry regarding your financial well-being." Follow-up, meaning someone didn't let it go. "I assume this relates to the dismissed petition," I said evenly. "Yes, ma'am. We are required to verify." Required. Another system check. Another layer of protection I had to pass. "Please come," I said. "I'll provide documentation." The caseworker arrived the following Tuesday. Mid-40s. Professional. Observant. She didn't treat me like a victim. She treated me like a file. We sat at my dining table. Bank summaries organized. Trust documentation tabbed. Cognitive evaluation report clipped neatly on top. She reviewed everything quietly. "You manage all accounts independently?" she asked. "Yes." "No co-signers?" "No." "Any recent unusual transfers?" "Only asset diversification after property sale." She nodded, flipped pages, checked dates, cross-referenced. Then she looked up. "Mrs. Bennett, may I ask something directly?" "Of course." "Why do you think this continues?" "Because losing access feels like losing power." But I answered differently. Because sometimes when you remove financial dependency, people mistake it for hostility. She held my gaze for a moment, then closed the folder. "I see no indicators of exploitation or impairment." Clear, official, documented. When she left, I didn't feel angry. I felt fortified. Because here's what I've learned. If someone wants to build a case against you, they will keep looking for cracks. So you remove the cracks. Not emotionally, structurally. That evening, Mark called again. "They contacted you, didn't they?" "Yes." Silence. "I didn't initiate that," he said quickly. "I didn't say you did." He hesitated. "It was Lauren." There it was. Residual control attempt. "She was scared," he added. "Of what?" I asked. "Of being cut out permanently." I leaned back in my chair. "I didn't cut anyone out," I said calmly. "I removed access. There's a difference." He was quiet. "I'm working on it," he said. "Working on what?" "On not reacting to money like it's oxygen," he clarified. That sentence surprised me, because it showed awareness. Not perfection, but awareness. "Good," I replied. A few days later, something unexpected happened. My grandson, Tyler, called. 16 years old, voice cracking between boy and man. "Grandma," he said awkwardly, "Dad told me some of what happened." I waited. "Are you mad at us?" "Us." Children absorb tension even when you try to hide it. "I'm not mad," I said carefully. "I set boundaries." He was quiet. "Mom says you don't trust us." Trust. Such a fragile word. "I trust you to grow," I answered. "I don't trust patterns." That confused him. "I don't understand." "You will someday," I said gently. He hesitated. "Dad said you set up something for us." The trust. Locked until 35. Yes. Why that age? Because at 25, you still think comfort is guaranteed. At 35, you understand consequences. "Because I want you to build something before you receive something," I told him. He was quiet again. Then, I think that's fair. Fair. From a 16-year-old. Sometimes clarity skips generations. After we hung up, I sat in the same kitchen where this whole unraveling began. The same table, the same chair, but I wasn't the same woman. I no longer measured love by how much I gave. I measured it by how well I protected. There's a misconception about older women. That we soften with age. That we become easier to manage. Less sharp, less strategic. They forget something important. We built entire lives before anyone tried to manage us. I didn't survive widowhood, real estate crashes, hospital bills, and single motherhood to surrender at 68. I adjusted, I corrected, I fortified, and here's the truth no one likes to admit. The moment you stop financing dysfunction, dysfunction panics. But panic fades. Responsibility either rises, or it collapses. In my case, it's still rising, slowly, not perfectly, but rising, and I'm watching, not as a bank, not as leverage, as a mother who finally understands that protection sometimes looks cold from the outside. But from the inside, it feels like peace. So let me ask you something. If the people you love tried to reclassify you as incapable, would you defend yourself, or would you sign just to keep the peace? And where are you watching from tonight? 6 months later, the house is quiet again. But it's a different kind of quiet. Mark no longer talks about estate structure. He talks about overtime hours, budget apps, refinancing wins. Lauren hasn't called adult services again. Patterns either die or mature. Mine did. Last Sunday, the kids came over. No tension, no legal language floating in the air. Tyler asked me about my first property deal. My granddaughter wanted to see old listing photos. No one asked about money. That was new. Mark helped me carry groceries inside. At the door he paused. I was wrong, he said quietly. Not dramatic, not rehearsed, just honest. I confused access with love. I looked at him for a long moment. I confused sacrifice with protection, I replied. We stood there in the doorway, not fixed, not perfect. But clear, and clarity is stronger than comfort. So tell me, would you have fought? And where are you watching from tonight?
Your voice matters here. Share your story below. Subscribe for more emotional family stories. Have you ever lived through something similar? Share in the comments. Your voice matters here.